button. Okay, so we're starting off Worfpoe's Sunday afternoon short story hour with a couple Harlan Ellison stories, Mom and Hitler Painted Roses, and then maybe a H.P. Lovecraft story. Next week I'm going to read all of H.P. Lovecraft's Chutula stories. Always fun reads. And then I have a couple of recent stories I've written and sold. Usually I don't read stories until they're published, um, but sometimes I want to test them out, see how they sound. So I'll read a couple of new stories by me, Worfpoe. I just wanted to mention this Wednesday on the Art of Dreaming is going to be the Halloween. It's going to be Halloween, so we'll do something Halloweenish and get all Luciferian. I'm going to discuss two wonderful, strange people, the Satan's lapdogs of the 20th century, Aleister Crowley and Anton LaVey. Just going to determine, talk about their lives, what they did, what they allegedly did. Here's a couple people that a lot of myth and hyperbole and propaganda has surrounded them. So, we take a look at these two men, and you could determine whether or not they were really as evil and bad as people said they were, what they really did, if the whole Moonchild ceremony thing, which created Barbara Pierce Bush, was true, or just tinfoil hat conspiracy theory stuff. So we'll take a look at that, and also what I want to do. Hopefully I'll write it, and I'm going to write a ghost story, a haunted radio ghost story for Wednesday. We'll call it Haunted Revolutions, and I'm going to write a story that's actually going to have some of your hosts in it. I'm going to write a story that's set a couple years in the future where the hijacker's ghost comes on the radio late at night. How does that sound? So, Haunted Revolutions will also be part of next Wednesday, and I'll start the story today and hopefully finish it by Wednesday. It's not going to be a long one. So, Haunted Radio Story. But for right now, we're going to do some Harlan Ellison ghost stories. Now, as I was talking about last week, is that both these stories, Mom and Hitler Painted Roses, were written in bookstore windows by Ellison. In the 70s and 80s, he would do these stunts by sitting in bookstore windows and writing a story between 9 and 5 that day. They would tape up the pages of the story on the window, because he would sit in the window of the bookstore, and then people who buy a certain amount of merchandise from the bookstore would get a photocopied of the story signed. It was a gimmick he did that worked pretty well. I mean, other writers have tried it, and he got a lot of work out of it. In fact, his collection, Strange Wine, most of the stories were written in bookstore windows. So we'll start with the first one, called Mom, which is he wrote as a challenge that someone told him every kind of ghost story has been written, and there's no new ones. Um, so his idea was, how about a Jewish mama's boy whose mother has just died, and the ghost comes back to nuts him. So there's a lot of Yiddish slang in here. Hopefully I'll get it right. Okay, so Mom by Harlan Ellison. Ghost story. Mom. In the living room, the family was eating. The card tables had been set up, and Tante Elka had laid out her famous tiny meat knishes, the matzah meal pancakes, the deli trays of corned beef, pastrami, chopped liver and potato salad, the lox and cream cheese, old kippers, boned for God's sake, it must have taken an eternity to do it, and smoked whitefish, stacks of corn rye and rice, nice pumpernickel, coleslaw, chicken salad, and flotillas of cucumber pickles. In the deserted kitchen, Lance Goldfiend sat smoking a cigarette, legs crossed at the ankles, staring out the window at the back porch. He jumped suddenly as a voice spoke directly above him. I'm gone 15 minutes only, and already you stink of cigarettes. Pfft! He looked around. He was alone in the kitchen. It wasn't altogether the most sensational service I've ever attended, if I can be frank with you. Sadie Fields said, "Now that was a service." He looked around again, more closely this time. He was still alone in the kitchen. There was no one on the back porch. He turned around completely, but the swinging door to the dining room and the living room beyond was firmly closed. He was alone in the kitchen. Lance Goldfein had just returned from the funeral of his mother, and he was alone, thinking, brooding in the kitchen of the house he now owned. He sighed. He heaved a second sigh. He must have heard a snatch of conversation from one of the relatives in the other room. Clearly. Obviously. Maybe. You don't talk to your own mother when she speaks to you. Out of sight and mind, is that correct? Oi! Now the voice had drifted down and was coming from just in front of his face. He brushed at the air as though cleaning away spiderwebs. Nothing there. He stared at emptiness and decided the loss of his mother had finally sent him over the brink. But what a tragic way to go bananas, he thought. I finally get free of her. May God bless her soul and keep her comfortable, and I still hear her voice nutsing me. I'm coming, Mom. At this rate, I'll be planted very soon. You're gone 3 days, and already I'm having guilt withdrawal symptoms. They're really fussing over there, the voice of his mother said. Now from somewhere down around his shoe tops. And, if you'll pardon my being impertinent, Lance, my darling son, who the hell invited that Monsmer Morris to my wake? In life I wouldn't have schmoozing him in my house. I should watch him stuff that fat face when I'm dead. Lance stood, walked over to the sink, and ran water on the cigarette. He carried the filter butt to the garbage can and threw it in. Then he turned very slowly and said to the empty room, "This is not fair. You are not being fair, not even a little bit fair." "What do I know from fair?" said the disembodied voice of his mother. "I'm dead. I should know about fair. Tell me from fair. To die is a fair thing? A woman in her prime?" "Mom, you were 66 years old." "For a woman with sound mind and limb, that's prime." He walked around the kitchen for a minute, whirled a few bars of Eli Eli just to be on the safe side, drew himself a glass of water and drank deeply. Then he turned around and addressed the empty room again. "I'm having a little trouble coming to grips with this, Mom. I don't want to sound too much like Alexander Portnoy, but why me?" No answer. "Where are you?" "Hey, Mom." "I'm in the sink." He turned around. "Why me? Was I a bad son? Did I step on an insect? Didn't I rebel against the Vietnam War soon enough? What was my crime, Mom, that I should be haunted by a ghost of a yenta?" "Oh, you'll be kindly watch your mouth. There's a mother you're speaking to." "I'm sorry." The door from the dining room swung open and Aunt Hannah was standing there in her galoshes. In the recorded history of humankind there had never been snow in Southern California, but Hannah had moved to Los Angeles 20 years earlier from Buffalo, New York, and there had been snow in Buffalo. Hannah took no chances. "Is there gilfite fish?" she asked. Lance was nonplussed. He said. "Gilfite fish," Hannah said. "Is there any?" "No, Aunt Hannah, I'm sorry. Elka didn't remember and I had other things to think about. Is everything else okay out there?" "Oh, sure, okay. Why wouldn't it be okay the day of your mother is buried?" It ran in the family. Listen, Aunt Hannah, I'd like to be alone for a while if you don't mind." She nodded and began to withdraw from the doorway. For a moment Lance thought he had gotten away clean, that she had not heard him speaking to whatever or whomever he had been speaking to. But she paused, looked around the kitchen and said, "Who are you talking to?" "I was talking to myself," he suggested, hoping she'd go for it. "Lance, You're a very ordinary person. You don't talk to yourself. I'm distraught. Maybe I'm unhinged. Who are you speaking to? The Sparklets man. He delivered a bottle of Mountain Spring mineral water. He was passing his condolences. Well, he certainly got out of the door fast before I came in. I heard you talking before I came in. Oh, he's big, he's fast. Covers the whole Van Nuys and Sherman Oaks area all by himself. Terrific person. You'll like him a lot. His name's Melville. Always makes me think of a big fish when I talk to him. He was babbling, hoping it would all go away. Hannah looked at him strangely. I take it all back, Lance. You're not that ordinary. Talking to yourself, I can believe. She went back to the groaning board. Sans geese-like fish. What a pity, said the voice of Lance Goldfiend's mother. I love Hannah, but she ain't playing with a full deck if you catch my drift. Mom, you've got to tell me what the hell is going on here. Could Hannah hear your voice? Oh, I don't think so. What do you mean you don't think so? You're the ghost. Don't you know the rules? I just got here. There are things I haven't picked up yet. Did you find a mahjong group yet? Don't be such a cutesy smart mouth, Lance. I could still give you a crack across the mouth. How? Your ectoplasm. Don't be disgusting. You know, I finally believe you. At first I thought I was going over the edge, but it's you. What I still want to know is why. And why you? And why me? Of all the people in the world, how did this happen to us? Oh, we're not the first. It happens all the time. You mean Conan Doyle really did speak to spirits? Oh, I don't know him. Oh, nice man. Probably still eligible. Look around up there. You're bound to run into him. Hey, by the way, you are up there, aren't you? What a dummy I raised. No, I'm not up there. I'm down here talking to you. Tell me about it, he murmured softly to himself. I heard that. I'm sorry. Oi. The door from the dining room swung open again, and half a dozen relatives were standing there. They were all staring at Lance as though he had just fallen off the moon. Lance, darling, said Aunt Rachel, would you like to come home tonight with Aaron and me? It's so gloomy here in the house all alone. What gloomy? It's the same sunny house it's always been. But you seem so distressed. From one of the kitchen cabinets, Lance heard the distinct sound of blatting raspberry. Mom was not happy with Rachel's remark. Mom had never been happy with Rachel to begin with. Aaron was Mom's brother, and she had always felt Rachel had married him because he had a thriving poultry business. Lance did not share the view. It had to have been true love. Uncle Aaron was a singularly unappetizing human being. He picked his nose in public and always smelled of defunct chickens. I'm not distressed, Rachel. I'm just unhappy, and I'm trying to decide what I'm going to do next. Going home with you would only put it off for another day, and I want to get started as soon as I can. That's why I'm talking to myself. They stared and smiled a great deal. Why don't you all leave me alone for a while? I don't mean to sound impertinent, but I think I'd like to be by myself. You know what I mean? Lou, who had more sense than all the rest of them put together, understood perfectly. That's not a bad idea, Lance. Come on, everyone, let's get out of here and let Lance do some thinking. Anybody need a lift? They began moving out, and Lance went with them to the front room where Hannah asked if he minded if she put together a doggy bag of food. After all, why should it go to waste such terrific deli goodies? Lance said he didn't mind, and Hannah and Rachel and Jerry and Lily and Benny, who were unmarried, all got their doggy bags, savaging the remains of the card tables until there was nothing left but one piece of pastrami. It wouldn't look nice to take the last piece, several pickles, and a dollop of potato salad. The Marabunta army ants could not have carried out a better program of scorching the earth. And when they were gone, Lance fell into the big easy chair by the television, sighed a sigh of relief, and closed his eyes. Good, said his mother from the ashtray on the other table. Now we could have a long mother-son heart-to-heart. Lance closed his eyes tighter. Why me, he thought. He hoped Mom would never be sent to hell, because he learned in the next few days that hell was being a son whose mother had come back to haunt him. And Mom, and if Mom were ever sent there, it would be a terrible existence in which she would no doubt be harassed by her own long-dead mother, her grandmothers on both sides, and God only knew how many random, nutsing relatives from ages past. Primary among the horrors of being haunted by a Jewish mother's ghost was the neatness. Lance's mother had been an extremely neat person. One could eat off the floor. Lance had never understood the efficacy of such an act, but his mother had always used it as a yardstick of worthiness for housekeeping. Lance, on the other hand, was a slob. He liked it that way, and for most of his 30 years, umbilically linked to his mother, he had suffered the pains of a running battle about clothes dropped on the floor, rings from coffee cups permanently staining the teak table, cigarette ashes dumped into the wastebasket from overflowing ashtrays without benefit of a trash can liner. He could recite by heart the diatribe attendant on his mother's having to scour out the wastebasket with Dow spray. And now, when by all rights he should have been free to live as he chose at long last, after 30 years, he had been forced to become a housemaid for himself. No matter where he went in the house, Mom was there, hanging from the ceiling, hiding in the nap of the rug, speaking up from him to him from the sink drain, calling him from a cabinet where the vacuum cleaner reposed a blissful disuse. A pigsty, would come the voice from empty air. A certifiable pigsty. My son lives in filth. Mom, Lance would reply, pulling a pop tab off a fresh can of beer and flipping a page of We. This is not a pigsty. It's an average, semi-clean domicile in which a normal, growing American boy lives. There's schmutz all over the sink from the peanut butter and jelly. You'll draw ants. Ants have more sense to venture in here and take their chances with you. He was finding it difficult to live. Mom, why don't you get off my case? I saw you playing with yourself last night. Lance sat straight up. You've been spying on me? Spying? A mother is spying when she is concerned her son will go blind from doing personal abuse things to himself. That's the thanks I get after 30 years of raising a son who's become a poivet. Mom, masturbation is not perversion. How about them filthy magazines you read with the girls in leather? You've been going through my drawers without opening, she murmured. This has got to stop, he shouted. It's got to end. E-N-D, end. I'm going crazy with you hanging around. There was silence, a long silence. Lance wanted to go to the toilet, but he was afraid she'd check it out to make sure his stools were firm and hard. The silence went on and on. Finally, he stood up and said, Okay, I'm sorry. Still silence. I said I was sorry, for Christ's sakes. What do you want more from me? A little respect. That's what I give you. A little respect. More silence. Mom, you gotta face it. I'm not your little boy anymore. I'm an adult with a job and a life and adult needs and he wandered around the house, but there was only more silence and more free-floating guilt. And finally he decided he would go for a walk, maybe go to the movies, in hopes Mom was housebound by the rules for ghost mothers. The only movie he hadn't seen was a sequel to a Hong Kong kung fu film, Return of the Street Fighter. But he paid his money and went in. No sooner had Sonny Chiba ripped out the man's genitals all moist and bloody and displayed them to the audience in a tight close-up Then Lance heard the voice of his mother behind him. "That is revolting. How can a son of mine watch such awful—" "Mom!" he screamed, and the manager came down and made him leave. His box of popcorn was still half full. On the street, passerby continued to turn and look at him as he walked past, conversing with empty air. "You've got to leave me alone, Mom. I need to be left alone. This is cruel and inhumane torture. I was never that Jewish." He heard sobbing from just beside his right ear. He threw up his hands. Now came the tears. "Mom, please." "I only wanted to do what right for you. Lance, if I only knew why I was sent back, what it was for, maybe I could make you happy, my son." "Mom, you'll make me happy as a pig in slop if you'll just go away for a while and stop snooping on me." "I'll do that." And she was gone. When it became obvious that she was gone, Lance went right out and picked up a girl in a bar. And it was not until they were in bed that she came back. "I turned my back for a second, and he's shtooping a bum from the streets. That I should live to see this." Lance had been way under the covers. The girl, whose name was Chrissy, had advised him she was using a new brand of macrobiotic personal hygiene spray, and he had been trying to decide if the taste was in fact, as asserted, papaya and coconut, or bean sprout and avocado, as his taste buds insisted. Crispy gasped and squealed. "We're not alone here," she said. Lance struggled from the depths as his hand emerged from beneath the sheet, and he heard his mother ask, "She isn't even Jewish, is she?" "Mom!" Chrissy squealed again. "Mom?" "It's just a ghost. Don't worry about it," Lance said reassuringly. Then to the air, "Mom, will you get out of here? This is very poor taste." "Talk to me of taste, Lance, my darling, that I should live to see such a thing. Will you stop saying that?" He was getting hysterical. "A Shiska, a Gentile yet. The shame of it. Mom, the Goyim are for practice." "I'm getting the hell out of here," Chrissy said, leaping out of the bed, long brown hair flying everywhere. "Put on your clothes, you homunca," Lance's mother shrilled. "Oh God, if I had only a wet towel, a coat hanger, a can of mace, something, anything." And there was such a howling and shrieking and jumping and yowling and shoving and slapping and screaming and cursing and pleading and bruising so had never been heard in the block in the San Fernando Valley. And when it was over and Chrissy had disappeared into the night to who knows where, Lance sat in the middle of the bedroom floor weeping, not over his being haunted, not over his mother's death, not over his predicament, but over his lost tumescence. And it was all downhill from there. Lance was sure of it. Mom, trying to soothe him, did not help in the least. "Sweetheart, don't cry. I'm sorry. I lost my head. You'll excuse the expression, but it's all for the best." "It's not for the best, Mom. She wasn't for you." "She was for me. She was for me," he screamed. "Not a Shiska. For you, a nice, cute girl of Semitic persuasion. Mom, I hate Jewish girls. Audrey was a Jewish girl. Bernice was a Jewish girl. That awful Darlene you fixed me up from the laundromat, she was a Jewish girl, and I hated them all. We have nothing in common." "Well, you just haven't found the right girl yet." "I hate Jewish girls because they're all like you." "Oh, may God wash your mouth out with a bar of Fels Nephtha," his mother said in a reverential tone. Then there was a meaningful pause, as though she had an epiphany, and she said, "That's why I was sent back. Oh, to find you a nice girl, a partner to go with you on the road of life, a loving mate who not only, incidentally, could be a very terrific cook. That's what I can do to make you happy, Lance, my sweetness. I can find someone to carry on for me now that I'm no longer able to provide for you. And by the way, that Nafka left a pair of underpants in the bathroom. I'd appreciate your burning them at your earliest opportunity." Lance sat on the floor and hung his head, rocked back and forth and kept devising, then discarding imaginative ways to take his own life. The weeks that followed made World War II seem like an inept performance of Gilbert and Sullivan. Mom was everywhere, at his job. Lance was an instructor for a driving school, a job Mom never considered worthy of Lance's talents. Mom, I can't paint or sculpt or sing. My hands are too stubby for surgery. I have no power drive, and I don't like movies very much, so that eliminates my taking over 20th Century Fox. I like being a driving teacher. I could leave the job at the office when I come home. Let it be already. And of course, at the job, she could not let be. She made nothing but rude remarks to the inept men and women who were thrust into Lance's care, and so terrified were they already, just the idea of driving in traffic, that when Lance's mother opened up on them, the results were horrendous. A driver, you call this idiot? Such a driver should be driving a dirigible. The only thing she would hit would be a big ape on a building, maybe. Into the rear of an R3D bus. Will you look at this person? Look at this lit guy, a refugee from the outpatient clinic of the Menninger Foundation. Up the sidewalk into a front yard. Now I've seen it all. The one not only thinks she's Jane Mansfield with the blonde wig and the skirt up around the pupnik, hopefully she'll arouse my innocent son, but she drives backwards like a pig with the staggers. Through a bus stop waiting bench, through a bus stop sign, through a car wash office, through a gas station, into the photomat. And she was not only on the job, but she was also at the club when Lance went to dance and possibly meet some women. She was at the dinner party a friend threw to celebrate the housewarming. The friend said the friend sold the house the following week, swearing it was haunted. She was at the dry cleaners, the bank, the picture framers, the ballet, and inevitably in the toilet, examining Lance's stools to make sure they were firm and hard. And every night there were phone calls from girls who received impossible urges to call this number. Are you Lance Goldfein? You're not going to believe this, but and I don't think I'm crazy. I heard this voice when I was at my kid's brother's bar mitzvah last Saturday. This voice kept telling me what a swell fella you are and how we'd get along so well. My name is Shirley, and I'm single, and they appeared at his door. They came up to him at work. They stopped by on their lunch hour. They accosted him in the street. They called and called and called, and they were all like Mom, thick ankles, glasses, sweet beyond belief. Scoffer chefs, every one of them, with tails of potato latkes as light as a Dyred's breath. And he fled them, screaming, but no matter where he hid, they found him. He pleaded with his mother, but she was determined to find him a nice girl. Not a woman, a girl, a nice Jewish girl. If there were easier ways of going crazy, Lance Goldfein could not conceive of them. At times he was really talking to himself. He met Joni at the Hughes Market. They bumped carts. He stepped backward into the display of Pringles, and she helped him clean up the mess. Her sense of humor was so black it lapsed over into the ultraviolet, and he loved her pixie haircut. He asked her for coffee. She accepted, and he silently prayed Mom would not interfere. 2 weeks later in bed, with Mom nowhere in sight, he told her he loved her, and talked for a long time about her continuing her career in advocacy journalism with a small Los Angeles weekly, and decided they should get married. Then he felt he should tell her about Mom. Oh, yes, I know, she said, when he was finished. You know? Oh, yes, your mother asked me to look you up. Oh, Christ. Oh, man, she said. What? Well, I met your mother, and we had a nice chat. She seems like a lovely woman. A bit too possessive, perhaps, but basically, she means well. You met my mother? Uh-huh. But, but, Joni. Oh, don't worry about it, honey, she said, drawing him down to her small but tidy bosom. I think we've seen the last of Mom. She won't be coming back. Some do come back. Some even get recorporated. But your mother has gone to a lovely place where she won't worry about you anymore. But you're so unlike the girl she tried to fix me up with. And then he stopped, stunned. Wait a minute. You met her? Then that means... Yes, dear, Joni said, that's what it means. But don't let it bother you. I'm perfectly human in every other way. And what's best of all is I think we've outfoxed her. We have? I think so. Do you love me? Yes. Well, I love you too. I never thought I'd fall in love with the Jewish girl my mother found for me, Joni. Well, that's what I mean about outfoxing her, Joni said. I'm not Jewish. You're not? No. I just had the right amount of soul for your mother, and she assumed. But, Joni, you can call me Joan, she said. But he never called her Maid d'Orleans, and they lived happily ever after, in a castle not all that neat. The end. Alright, that was kind of a silly little funny story called Mom by Harlan Ellison. Originally published in, originally published in 1976 in Silver Foxes magazine. I think that was an outshoot magazine from We. You remember the old men's magazine, We, O-U-I? Next ghostly story by Harlan Ellison. It's called Hitler Painted Roses. Let me wet my whistle here. Hang on here. Hitler Painted Roses was, of course, another story that he wrote in a bookstore window. And was originally published, in 1977 in Penthouse magazine. And from his collection, Strange Wine. Hitler Painted Roses by Harlan Ellison. The precise moment of the opening of the doorway to hell occurred on Friday the 13th, apparently 10 days earlier than usual for the autumnal equinox to manifest itself. This discrepancy was only superficial, however, to those familiar with the changeover from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian in 1582. The 10-day prematurity was utterly harmonious. As the moldering sun passed the celestial equator going north to south, numberless portents revealed themselves. A two-headed calf was born in Dorset near the little town of Bladford. Wrecked ships rose from the depths of the Marianas Trench. Everywhere children's eyes grew old and very wise. Over the Indian state of Maharashtra, clouds assumed the shapes of warring armies. Leprous moss quickly grew on the south side of Celtic megaliths and then died away in minutes. In Greece, the pretty little gilly flowers began to bleed, and the earth around their clusters gave off a putrescent smell. All 16 of the ominous diarrhea designated by Julius Caesar in the 1st century BC, including the spilling of salt and wine, stumbling, sneezing, and the creaking of chairs, made themselves apparent. The aurora australis appeared in the Maiori. A horned horse was seen by the Basques as it ran the streets of Vizcaya. Numberless other augutries. And the doorway to hell opened. For just a moment, the macrocosmic maze of the universe proffered exits, and escapes were effaced and effected. Jack the Ripper fled. Caligula slipped away. Charlotte Corday, her hands still reeking with Marat's blood, seized the moment to get away. Edward Teach, beard still bristling, but with the ribbons therein charred and colorless, decamped, laughing hideously. Burke and Hare and Crippen, who had become friends of the foul place, ran off together. Cain's release was realized. Caesar and Lucretia Borgia elbowed one another in their attempts to break loose, and the sister won her poisonous freedom, leaving the impotent brother behind. George Armstrong Custer galloped up and off into the flame on a flaming ghost stallion, his long blond hair trailing fire, hounds baying at the heels. Others. Hitler. Hitler found himself directly beside the portal, and could have escaped, but he did not. He had found a home. His eternity had been spent painting roses on the walls of hell, and he could not leave his masterpiece behind. The doorway closed, and all was as it had been before. As it closed, a paradoxical whirlpool was created in the megaflow, sucking back all the doomed souls but one. Margaret Thrushwood escaped undetected. Impossibly, for the very best records were always kept up to date in hell. No notice was taken of her absence, and all was as it had been. But Margaret Thrushwood, recently quartered in hell, was back in the world. There had been a multiple slaying in Downiesville in 1935. There had been a house in Downiesville that the residents call the Octagon House because of the shape in which it had been built. Ramsdale had been the name of the family that had built and lived in the Octagon House. The Ramsdales had been in mining, and when the mine had played out, they had gone into cattle and farming. Wealthy, friendly, interested in their community, giving and sharing during the Great Depression, they had been both loved and respected in Downiesville. The slaughter at the Ramsdale Octagon House had shocked and infuriated the God-fearing townsfolk. Margaret Thrushwood, the housekeeper, 31 years old, had been the only person left alive in the abattoir. Covered with blood and crying piteously, she had been found crouched down, half naked, in the dining room, clogged with the bodies of 6 Ramsdales, 3 of whom had been children. The townsfolk had dragged her from the house and drowned her in the nearby well. Lynching was commonplace in 1935. On the Friday the 13th, the day of chill winds and rivers that tried for a moment to run upstream, the burned and ruined shade of Margaret Thrushwood returned to Downiesville. Henry Doc Thomas no longer lived there. He had died in 1961. The still smoldering cinder that was the shade of Margaret Thrushwood did not linger long in Downiesville. In Midgard, it had not been held the waiting shadow of Henry Doc Thomas. She continued searching, and when she realized he was not there, she gave a pitiful wail that made babies cry throughout the town, and she continued searching. He had not gone to hell. She would have met him there and settled accounts between them again, and possibly, defying all logic, refuting the commonly held belief that the universe balances itself in crystalline purity between good and evil, justice and injustice, Henry Thomas had been taken to heaven. Freed from the foul place, Margaret Thrushwood crawled to heaven to find the man who had taken her virginity. It was near twilight when she reached heaven. The blessed host moved in slow and stately patterns. Heaven was a great pastel city suffering from overcrowding. The faces of the residents seemed strained, but the sound of muted laughter was everywhere. It was considerably cooler than hell had been. There were no birds in the sky. Crickets nattered. Margaret Thrushwood asked directions and was led by stages to a common square where a pool of pale golden water whispered gently against the coming of evening, and there, at the edge of the pool, she found Henry Thomas with his bare legs dangling in the water. She came up behind him and her hands clenched into fists without her knowledge. The clenching was painful. Her hands were terribly burned. She wanted to hit him. She tried to speak, and found she could not. Was it too much emotion, or that she had not spoken in hell, save for a scream, for so very long? She tried again and again, and managed to speak his name. Doc! A tremor passed through him, and he stared straight ahead. She said his name again. He turned his head slowly and looked up at her. As their eyes met, he began to cry. Hidden in the moment was the memory of that evening. She sank to her knees beside him and looked at his face. It was 26 years older than the face that had compelled her love in 1935. Torment lay like a patina of dust across the fine features. He had not shaved. Perhaps he was not required to shave here. Perhaps he had been unshaved at the moment of his death. She wondered how he had died, but the thought was a vagrant breeze. She wanted to take his face in her blackened hands and feel once again the heat that came from him. But it was not possible. Too much time, too many moments in hell lay between them, and that evening lay between them. And he cried. Helplessly, he stared at her. He was totally and wholly at her command now. He whispered her name, then again. And the hearing of it twice, so quickly like that, melted all the hatred in her. She leaned forward and put her sooty face against his shoulder. Black marks were left on his white flesh. She made gentle, baby-soothing sounds, even as her own body trembled. She had never seen him like this. The last time she had seen him had been that night, as heaven began to run at the edges. Margaret looked over Doc's shoulders. The sky of heaven was beginning to smear and drip. She had seen a house run that way once, just the year before, 1934. Ultraviolet rays and moisture worked rapidly on the linseed oil binder in the paints of the time. Rain would get at the fascia and trim and produce what house painters called chalking. The colors would run. That was common in 1934 and 35. There was a trembling in the ground beneath them. The pale golden water of the pool gently swelling to the left, then the right. It sloshed back and forth, overflowing first to one side and then the other. It grew much warmer. Margaret thought she heard the cry of a bird, but there were still no birds in the sky, nowhere in that smeared drizzle of heavenly sky color running down. She held on to Doc as tightly as she could. The silvery light that had no source, the illuminated heaven, dimmed, and disturbing cancers of darkness appeared here and there in the empty spaces around the square. Margaret pressed herself more tightly into Doc's body, as she had that night, there in her servant's room at the rear of the Octagon House. Oh, the room. She could see it now in her mind, just as fresh and sharp as it was. When? Was it that many years ago? Just yesterday, back in 1935? Just one real day ago, when they dragged her out of the house and tied the well rope around her ankles, and one of the men doubled his fist and hit her in the side of the head, and another man bounced her face off the bricks of the wall, and they hoisted her up, dazed and squirming and crying, and now completely naked, so embarrassed at her nakedness, and tipped her head down and threw her over the lip into the darkness, way down there, all the way down there to the foul place. Was it just a day ago in real time? Not 40, 50, 100 years ago, burning, always burning? She could see the room, the sweet little smell of the Ramsdales had given her when she came to work for them, from Dr. Polney's in Oxnard, though the big kitchen with the butcher's block table in the middle and the matched copper-bottom pans banging from their hooks, and the slick, sweet smell of freshly washed down oilcloth on the breakfast nook table, and the wood-burning stove the Ramsdales continued to use even though there was piped-in gas. Through the main pantry, the huge walk-in pantry with the circular staircase at the back wall, the staircase that led up
to the second and third floors where the family had their bedrooms, where Mr. Ramsdale slept and could get up quietly in the middle of the night and come downstairs for a snack of some kind or another, and the door to her room, her servant's room, she being the full-time paid well, just 28 years old when she came to them as a housekeeper, under the circular staircase that led up to Mr. Ramsdale, who came down very late in the night for snacks, the door to her sweet and clean and neat as a pin room. The sky ran, the ground trembled, darkness swirled through heaven, and the blessed host ran in random directions, trying to escape the increasing warmth as Margaret Thrushwood clung to the weeping body of Doc Thomas, as she had that evening. Don't you want to know where my dreams come from? He looked down at her, and the smile came to his face even though he fought to contain it. Why should I want to know where it comes from? Because it's necessary to know that dreams come from someplace close, from someplace dear. Otherwise, they would be no better than wishes for money or great runs of land or all that caviar you could eat. Well, so tell me where dreams come from. She sat up on the bed in the small room in the rear of the huge pantry. She wore only a slip and her silk stockings. They had been making love on the bed, and her skin was pink from having been pressed. Small marks on her breasts and the upper arms testified to the intensity of her love, intense enough for her to give herself up to his need to nibble, even when it was risky, that someone might see the signs of passion. She said, my dreams comes from seeing my mother. She was from Birmingham, in England. I told you that, didn't I? He smiled, as he had smiled at a child who had brought him a hummingbird with a broken wing just that morning. Yeah, you told me that. Oh, I knew I had. Come hold me while I tell you some more. He slid back onto the bed and they lay side by side. He held her, with her chestnut hair which she had let down till it reached the back of her knees, all her beautiful hair blanketing her naked body. Her head was pressed into the secret hollow under his chin, and he heard her speaking from far away. My mother always worked. I cannot remember a time when she wasn't working. My father died when I was very young. My mother told me that. But you didn't believe her, he said softly. She sat up and stared at him. Good Lord, Doc, how could you know that? He motioned her to resume the position. At that moment, he coughed. He had been sick, a minor summer cold, but the cough was very loud. She grew alarmed, fell back upon him, and put her hand over his mouth. Shh! They're eating dinner. They think I'm meditating. They mustn't know you're here. Oh, Doc, why did you come here so early? I couldn't wait to see you. His words were muffled by her hand. He kissed her palm against his lips. Oh, you mustn't. Not ever again. Late is the only time. Very, very late, Doc. Then she paused as if considering something and added, but sometimes not too late at night. He didn't get a chance to ask her what that meant. My father really ran off. Then my mother saved her money and followed him to New York. She got tired of waiting for him to send her the fare. He was a furniture refinisher. So she worked and saved it herself and came without telling him, because I think she wanted to catch him living with that girl, and he was, of course, and then he just ran off and left the both of them. My mother became friends with her. That was my Aunt Sally. He slid her slip up her legs. She tried to push it back down, but his hands were there. Oh, she said, as if it were the first time, and again, and when she moved over her. Oh. The door opened. She heard the soft sound of the empty cardboard box she had placed against the door moving against the floor. She had come to place the cardboard box there as a matter of course every night, so she would know when she was asleep if she was to be visited very, very late at night. Some nights Mr. Ramsdale came downstairs for a snack of some kind or another. She looked over Doc's shoulder, and he was watching them. He did not stop them. He watched until Doc was finished, muffling his sounds against the pillow, and then when Doc rose up slightly to look at her to see if he was ahead or behind, and Doc saw she was starting past him, and he strained around to see what she was looking at. Then he spoke to them. "I'll have no whores under my roof. Be packed and gone before we're done eating." He turned, leaving the door open, and walked away, stopping from his 6-foot height to pass under the circular staircase that led up to the bedrooms. Doc was braced with a hand on either side of her semi-naked body, staring down at her. "My mother was in the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire of 1911, she said. She spoke as if they had not been interrupted in their conversation, as if he had not made love to her again, as if they had not been discovered, as if Mr. Ramsdale had not looked at them with the burning eye of God, as if she had not been told to leave within minutes. She always worked. That was where my dream came from." Then she began to cry. Henry Thomas rose from her body and from her bed. He looked down at her. Then he looked at the open door and the cardboard box. He had wondered about the cardboard box. It wasn't strong enough or heavy enough to keep anyone out. He had wondered why she had placed it there, and now he knew what she meant by her warning that he not come visit very, very late some nights. He seemed to shrink then, to grow smaller. He was a tall man, a good and 6-scoring height for the veterinarian who must reassure small children who came to them with the broken-winged hummingbird and the puppy with the worms and the cat that had lost an eye in a fight. But he shrank. He withered. He fell upon himself, making a terrible, heartbreaking, wounded sound. And then he went mad. He grabbed her from the bed by her long chestnut hair and threw her through the open door across the linoleum floor to the pantry. He followed her, now suddenly growing large again, swelling as if filling with poison, and dragged her by the hair across the kitchen linoleum. She tried to turn over and saw in his hand a cleaver from the rack on the wall. He had taken it, but she did not know when he had put his hand to it first. And then when they were in the dining room, and Doc was screaming about theft and valuables that had been stolen, and defilement and other insane things that made no sense, and then he was blood all over, and his hand went up and down in the movement too swift to see, and there was blood on the walls and across the damask tablecloth, and there were spots of thick, terrible color on the crystal prisms of the low-hanging chandelier, and there was screaming. And then she was alone, lying in blood, half naked, 31 years old, the only thing left alive in the dining room of the Octagon House, until they came and put her down the well. Lava filled the heavenly pool. It had seeped in through the fissures at the bottom, and the pale golden water had been dissipated as stream. Now it boiled up, green and black, an angry chrism just beneath the crackling, shifting crust. Margaret Thrushwood clung to Henry Thomas and felt their bodies trembling in unison. "Why did you leave me?" she said, so softly he could barely hear her above the crackling of the lava. There she was, pulling him to his feet, and she noticed that through his bare legs he had been submerged in the pool and the lava, and they were untouched. In the foul place she had been sent to the lava baths. It was not the same. That was probably the chief differences between heaven and hell. She took him away from the pool, and they stood near one of the pastel walls, even as it developed jagged lightning fork rents in the smooth face. The air was thick and charged. Then God came to them, and whatever else was said or funny or according to legend or cleverly beyond anyone's imagining, there was nothing humorous about God in their multiplicity. They came to Margaret Thrushwood and the trembling shade that was Henry Doc Thomas, and they said, "You are an alien flesh here. You cannot stay." "I won't go back," said Margaret Thrushwood, speaking to them more boldly than she had ever spoken before, either in life or death, speaking to them as though they were not God at all, just speaking up boldly. "It was a mistake. I never did anything wrong. He did it all, and then he ran away, and I never had a chance. You should know that. You keep records, don't you?" But God insisted, pointing back the way Margaret Thrushwood had crawled. "Take him down there," she said. Then she caught herself. "No, no, I didn't mean that. Let him be. He couldn't make it down there." God was pulling her by the arm. All right, don't pull me. I can go on my own, thank you." And God let go of her arm, and she said to them, "Give me a second." And God waited, but not patiently, because heaven was fracturing at every juncture. Margaret took Henry Thomas's faces in her hands and looked into his eyes, and she realized he had grown shorter and she had grown taller, just as it had happened that night. She leaned in close to him and murmured, "They did it wrong, Doc. They made mistakes, and they'll keep it that way, just because everyone wants to believe it. They don't want to know the truth, Doc. It's easier for everyone that way. It's enough people believe the fantasy. Well, then it becomes the reality. But we know, Doc. We know who belongs where, don't we?" And she kissed him gently and patted his cheek and shook her head at the stupidity of it all. She looked at God, and they looked back at her impatiently. There are some people there are some people who just don't shouldn't be allowed to fool around with love, she said to God. He was irrational. What did Mr. Ramsdale matter? What did any of it matter? Then God led her away, back toward the foul place. When they reached the doorway, God knocked, and after a little while the doorway opened, loosing a terrible smell. "I can make it by myself from here," Margaret Thrushwood said, drawing herself up regally. She stepped across the threshold, but just as the door was closing, she turned to God and said, "When you see Mr. Ramsdale, give him my regards." Then she walked inside the door, and the doorway closed again. And the last thing God saw, as Margaret Thrushwood crawled down into crimson darkness, was a short, shadowy figure just inside the portal. The figure was naked and smoldering and held a paintbrush and a palette. Covering the walls of hell just inside the portal was a fresco of roses so painfully beautiful to behold that they could not wait to get back to find Michelangelo to tell him about the grandeur they beheld there in the most of unlikely places. The end. Okay, that was Harlan Ellison's Hitler Painted Roses from 1977 from his collection Strange Wine, written in a bookstore window in one day. Harlan Ellison was good at that. Uh, Same thing with like Robert Silverberg and Isaac Asimov and Robert Heinlein, all these writers who supported themselves during the pulp writing eras and they had to write fast, were pretty good at, not never having really to rewrite. They would just get it all out, and that's that. So, let's see. I'm going to skip the H.P. Lovecraft story because I'm going to read all Lovecraft next week, Cthulhu and stuff like that, so I could get to my stuff here. And so I got a couple of new stories. One was sold to Alfred Hitchcock's magazine, Mystery Magazine, and another to Analog, and another is new. Let me see which one I'm going to read first. I'm going to read this one first. And this one is about super soldier programs, kind of. It's about clones and super soldiers. It's certainly a topic we all know well here at Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, which I'd like to mention. Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com is 100% user generated, listener supported. That means that we rely on you, our lovely listeners, to keep on keeping on. We don't run ads or
grants, take grants, government supported or whatever, corporations, et cetera, et cetera. And so we rely on donations to pay for servers and energy and upkeep and all that stuff to make sure we're still on the air, delivering you all kinds of information, truths, entertainment, conversations, debates, fights sometimes, and news. So if you go to our site support, I'm all blah, blah, blah this morning. If you go to our landing page over at freedomslips.com or revolution-radio.com, you'll see a site support button which will take you to PayPal. If you don't dig on PayPal, if you don't trust it, use it. There's also a snail mail address. You could send cash. No, don't send cash. Send money orders, checks, stuff like that. Help us out. Uh, we do have monthly bills, and we're always appreciative of your support, and we thank you very much. So onwards, as I said, next week I'm going to read all H.P. Lovecraft stories, Rise of the Cthulhu and stuff like that. And then this Wednesday on The Art of Dreaming, we're going to, for Halloween, we're going to discuss various aspects of Anton LaVey and Aleister Crowley. The myths, the truths, the writings, call-ins and stuff. And then if I finish it, I'm writing a ghost story for Halloween called Haunted Revolutions. And hopefully I'll finish it up and we'll get to that. And then the following week we'll do part 2 of the Palladians, talk about Palladian messages of spirituality and reincarnation. And then I believe the week after that we're going to do the Arcturians with Dr. Suzanne Lee, who author of the Arcturian Corridor, and she will tell us what the Arcturians' agenda is and how they are helping us to ascend. I'm really excited about having Dr. Lee on, and we'll talk all things Arcturian. That will hopefully be November 14th. So onwards with my work, my stories. Like I said, the first one I'm going to read is a super soldier cloning story. And the story is called Sleeping with a Weapon, or More Allisons Than I Know What to Do With, by Michael Hemmingson. Yours truly, Worfpoe, Doc H, Papa Hem, etc., etc. Okay. Sleeping with a Weapon, or More Allisons Than I Know What to Do With. I didn't intend to murder Allison Benning twice. She was having a flashback of something that happened in Afghanistan or Iraq, and she went crazy on me. It was a heat-of-the-moment action, and I believe it could be classified as self-defense. You would have to know the full story, which I am prepared to tell. I met Allison 7 weeks ago at my friend Wendy's birthday party. She had just turned 30 and was ambiguous about this milestone age. So many candles on the cake, she laughed sarcastically, but I could hear her thoughts. I haven't accomplished enough yet. I haven't done enough yet. I haven't put my mark on the world. I knew because I had the same thoughts 5 months ago when I turned 33. Allison was the sister of one of Wendy's friends. She claimed she was dragged to this party. Her sister insisted she get out and meet new people. She had just returned from 2 tours in the Middle East, stationed both in Afghanistan and Iraq. She was Army. I was taken with her. She was tall, fit, with piercing blue eyes and a pointed jaw, blonde-haired, pulled back in a tail. She had the best posture I'd ever seen on a woman, and I knew that was the Army. She was 27. She gave me her number, and I played the rules and waited 3 days to call her. Well, it took your time, Mr. Thompson, she said. She agreed to meet me for dinner that night. We had Italian in a small cozy joint I knew in West Hollywood. I told her I was a screen and TV writer, that I had 2 independent films under my belt, and had sold a pilot that never made it to test on the air. They paid you for it, she said. But it was never shown? Paid well, I said.
That's the nature of the business. Tell me, I have no idea how it works. I was more than pleased to talk about my world. Every year the networks and cables buy, say, 80 to 100 TV ideas. You go in and pitch the idea, write a 3 to 4 page proposal, and what they call a leave behind. If the execs like it, they buy it. You write the pilot before Christmas. Over the holidays, these execs read 80 to 100 pilots they bought, anywhere from 50 to $100,000 each, and decide which ones to go forward with and shoot. The test pilot, which will be, say, 18 or 20. These get shot using non-union actors and go through meetings and focus groups and more meetings and focus groups and screenings by Madison Avenue suits and more meetings. The ad guys determine what kind of ads they may sell to match a show based on what they think the mass public out there wants to watch when they sit in front of the glass T. Perhaps 8 or 10 of these will get lucky. The pilot reshot with union actors, a few known faces and names, and then aired. Numbers of viewers and audience reaction are analyzed. Of those 8 or 10, 1 or 2 will make it to a full season and go on to season 2. Well, how far did yours go? Focus groups. $2 million spent down the drain. Seems like a waste of money. Like I said, nature of the business. I don't know why my sister wanted to get into this business. She's a costumer, like your friend Wendy, but she really wants to be a producer of some sort. Doesn't everyone want to be in the entertainment biz here in LA? Well, of course. Not me. Well, I bet you have some great stories of your army service that would make a great show, I said, my head going to story production and life exploitation. Not really, she said with a smile. I saw no action. I was behind the scenes. You're still a hero. Oh, please, she laughed. Do you really think a line like that will get me into bed? She was in my bed on the third date like the rules dictate. She liked it vigorous and rough, and I respected, as I suspected a soldier would. Hold me until I sleep, she said. She didn't sleep well. She tossed, turned, and hit me in the face and screamed out a set of numbers that didn't make sense. I'm sorry, she told me. That's okay. I lied when I said I didn't see any action, she said. I was in some pretty hairy battles and lost some close friends in my unit. I was taken hostage for 3 days by insurgents, and a Delta team rescued us. Wow, was all I could say. Oh, I could see it in your eyes. My eyes? You're writing a pilot for a TV show. She had me. That's all right, she said. It might make an interesting program. I kept seeing her. I enjoyed it. Bruises and scratches and bitten lips. Each time we got together, she opened up more, felt comfortable enough to tell me about seeing her friends killed when they drove over improvised explosive devices or their Humvees were hit by RPGs. She told me how many enemy combatants she had shot and killed and how they had roughed her up while she was a prisoner and came close to being raped if the Deltas had not burst in. I'm thinking of re-enlisting for a third tour, she said. My sister will freak out, but I'm serious. Why? After all that happened? Because it's real over there, she said seriously. Is it real here in Los Angeles, Hollywood? It's all make-believe. It's all BS illusion, people living fantasies in virtual lives. I don't want that. I grew up here. I know that life is not for me. I don't know what I want, she said, but I never felt more alive in war than I ever have. Here it's all REEL spelled like the spool in the moving pictures. Yet 3 weeks later she informed me that she was now having second thoughts about re-enlisting because she was officially in love with my sorry dreamer's ass. I didn't know how to respond to that. You never do when someone says I love you and you do not love them back. No need to answer, TV boy, she said, fingers on my lower lip. What I feel has nothing to do with what you feel, and I can wait. Wait for what? I was fond of her. She was great to talk to and have sex with, but I had only known her for 7 weeks, and I was more occupied with getting a staff writer's job on a new hit science fiction show than getting involved. If I landed the job, I wouldn't have the free time to see her as I did as an unemployed writer. Then we had our first big fight. It was about a camping trip she and her sister had planned, a week in Big Bear. Her sister was bringing her fiance, and Allison wanted to know if I would join them. A week, I said. A weekend, perhaps, but Allison, I'm sorry, I can't do a whole week out of the city. She wasn't pleased with my response. Why not? I could be called into a meeting last minute, I told her. I have pitches out there. I'm up for the staff position. I have to be in the city. Company town, she said with distaste. You know how it is. Look, I'll go 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, and leave me alone with my sister and her future husband. It's the best I can do. Is it because of what I said, she asked? Confessing I love you? What? No, no. I could see it in your eyes. See what? I don't expect you to love me back yet, but I expect you to not lie to me and pull this bullcrap. Allison, I said, and then I got it. Her flattened palm into my nose. I felt the blood flow. I don't know what happened. It was in her eyes. She was not the same person. She was a madwoman or a soldier, and she had a serious intent to hurt me. She used whatever hand-to-hand combat training she had been given and did some serious damage to my body, hiding her hands and feet. Uh, that should be using her hands and feet. Here I am editing my story online. Kicking and punching and chopping and screaming, calling me every name in the book. Kidnap and torture me, she yelled, and I felt a rib crack as I went to the ground. She was not here in Los Angeles. She was somewhere back in the Middle East, reliving a moment of violence. And I was not the guy she was dating, but an insurgent who had to be taken down. And down I went. I woke up in my bed, and every inch of my body hurt, like Godzilla had stepped on me a few times, treating me like I was little Tokyo. She must have put me in bed after she knocked me out. I could hear her in the living room pacing about, talking to herself. I reached under the bed where I kept a .38 snub-nose in a shoebox for intruders. There are a lot of criminals in Los Angeles. I checked the chamber and made sure the 6 rounds were there. I had been on the firing range, and my dad had taught me how to shoot. I limped to the living room, wondering if she had broken my foot. Determination and self-preservation kept me moving. She stopped pacing when she saw me. Oh God, Brad, she said. I'm so sorry what I did. I don't know what happened. I snapped and she saw the gun I was pointing at her. Brad? Get out of my apartment, I said as calmly as I could. I don't understand. Get out of my home and get the hell out of my life, you psychopathic bitch. Her eyes became hard. You don't know what you're saying. I don't know what happened to you, I said, but you're nuts, and I want nothing of it. Look at what you did to me. She stepped forward. I can explain. I didn't give her a chance. I fired 3 times, all in her chest. I poured myself 3 shots of vodka. I wasn't aware of the pain in my body now that I had a dead body to contend with. I considered what to do. Call the cops. Would they believe me? Soldier goes crazy, uses the karate chops. I had to shoot her. Or would I get 15 years for manslaughter? I had plans, dreams, schemes. Even if the DA agreed it was self-defense, the scandal would ruin me. No studio wanted to hire a writer who shot a woman, justified or not. I used to surf in Malibu when I first moved to Los Angeles. I still had 2 boards and 2 surfboard bags. Allison fit into one of the bags. Hang on a second. Allison fit into one of the bags. I had to bend her body some using gloves on my hem. I got her in there, zipped the bag up, carried the bag over my shoulder down to the garage, and placed her in the trunk. No one saw me. I had no idea what I would say if anyone did.
I drove toward Malibu. It was past midnight. I kept to the speed limit. I stopped off at a canyon on the way. No one was on the road. I parked, opened the trunk, and dumped her body into the canyon. Driving home, I went through my story for when Wendy reported to the cops her sister was missing more than 24 hours. I was expecting her to come by, I would say, and she never did. Now everything was going great. Oh, we planned a weekend trip with her sister and fiancé. I'm really worried about her. Did you ask the army? Maybe she went back. And when someone found the body, I couldn't think that far. I slept for 2 days. Then my agent for lunch. Then met my agent for lunch. He had a meeting set up for me with Harold Croker, head of a new cable station looking for quality material. Get your best pitches ready, said the agent. Normally I would have been excited, but the only thing on my mind was Allison Benning's body, when they would find it, and what I would say when the cops came around. But there were no cops for now, and what I found strange was that Wendy had not called or come around asking where her sister was. I found out why when I got home. Allison was there. She was cooking dinner, some sort of stuffed bell pepper. She had opened a bottle of wine. Bet you didn't know I was an awesome cook, she said. I thought I'd make us something special for our 2-month anniversary. She looked fine, no gunshot wounds, no bruises from being tossed into a canyon. She was more chipper than she usually was, the Allison I had known. It was obvious I had no idea who this woman was. I killed her again when she slept, after we had made a curious, tender love, no rough stuff. I took a pillow, put it over her face, and pulled the trigger twice. I used the second surfboard bag and did the same as before, bundled her into it, took her to a canyon, and tossed it down. Let's see you climb back up with 2 bullets in your brain, I muttered into the darkness of the earth. The next day she called and asked if I had a sleeping bag for our trip to Big Bear. If I have an extra and a tent if you need it. I'll come by at 7, okay? She said. I have a surprise for you. I want to cook you dinner. Well, I guess it won't be a surprise now, huh? See you then, Brad. Love ya. I didn't even contemplate how weird this was getting. All I knew was that I was going to get it right. I was going to kill her for good this time. I would put 6 bullets into her body, then reload the pistol and put 6 more into the carcass. I would chop off her head and bury it in the desert and pull her body in a different canyon. It was 5 o'clock and I heard someone open the door to my apartment. She had gotten in before. She must have made a copy of my key. Why was she here so early? No matter. I would kill her now rather than later. A middle-aged man with a bald head wearing a military uniform stood at the open door and smiled at me. Hello, Mr. Thompson. I pointed the gun at him. No need for that, Mr. Thompson. Someone was behind me. Before I could turn, I felt a needle pierce my neck and my knees gave way. I felt like jelly and I laughed at the man's bald head and asked, Where did all your hair go? I came to, sitting on the living room couch, still smiling. The man in the uniform sat across from me, and another bald man, twice the size and half the age as the uniform guy, was wearing a dark sweater and black jeans, stood to the right of me, a syringe in his hand. He was waiting. How do you feel, Mr. Thompson? Asked the man in the uniform. Strangely pretty good, I said. Is this some kind of happy drug you gave me? I felt calm, at ease, wanted to giggle. We gave you something to relax you, so that your mind will be more receptive to what I'm about to say. Well, lay it on me, General Feelgood, I said and giggled. That would be Colonel, son, he said, serious. You murdered one of our operatives, 2 units destroyed, in fact. Allison seemed to be happy dating you, so what happened? Are you a serial killer and our file on you was all wrong? She's a nutcase, I said. She snapped on me, acting like she was back in the Middle East and I was the enemy. She beat the crap out of me. I thought she was going to snap for good and do me in, so I protected myself. What triggered her alter? Her what? What made her violent? We had an argument, nothing big, but she wigged out. She's a trained killer, son, a weapon. And I was sleeping with her, I said, finding it funny. Here's the situation, son. Allison Benning was created by me and my team. We took a young enlistee and played with the wetware and made us what we call a super soldier. But losing such a unit, all that money and time and training put in, well, we had to ensure the weapon would remain intact should something unfortunate happen. So we cloned her and many others. Whenever one unit is terminated, a new one is automatically switched on. The memories of the dead dead one get transferred to the new one. I won't go into all the details of this technology because you need a clearance I couldn't get, and you wouldn't understand it. Hell, I barely do myself. All I know is that you killed 2 Allison units and they were replaced. We can't afford you killing a third, the one heading over here at 7. I almost believe you, I said. You got any other explanation why the woman you murdered keeps coming back? You got me there. Say, I giggled, aren't you telling me top secret stuff? You're not going to kill me now or wipe my memory, are you? What good would that do? You became part of the experiment, Mr. Thompson. We wanted to see if our super soldiers could reintegrate themselves back into society. After all the programming, training, and experience, could the originals or copies return to their old lives, become civilians? We were pleased about the relationship and that she'd fallen in love because it looked like it could be a success. She would return to civilian life, but always be ready to go on a mission if we needed her, or her clone. So instead of terminating your function, Mr. Thompson, I want to make you a deal you cannot refuse, and the drugs we put in you should make the deal sound feasible and sweet. You will continue your relationship with Allison Benning. You will refrain from any arguments that will trigger her alter, the super soldier as it were, and you will make her happy. Marry her, perhaps. Have children. Well, that's asking a lot, I said. Am I supposed to do it as a patriotic duty? Not at all. We will give you something in return, something that you desire more than anything else. Yeah? What, strawberry ice cream? Because I'd sure love some right now. Giggles, giggles, ha ha. What the hell are they giving me? In a few days you have a meeting with Harold Corker, the guy said, a powerful new player in Tinseltown, and one of ours. On your desk you will find a proposal for a new TV show. A TV show that will be the green light and be a hit. A TV show that will make you rich and allow you to create more TV shows down the line. And an important executive producer and showrunner with his beautiful wife Allison at his side. And if I reject that life? Well, we erase you. Your choice. He nodded to the other bald man in a suit, who moved to inject me in the neck with a syringe. I found myself sitting at the table with Allison, eating the linguine and baked potatoes she had prepared. Well, she said. It's wonderful, I said. A woman who can cook. A soldier and a chef, she said. Chef, she said, grabbing my hand. A keeper, I heard myself saying, groggy and stifling one last giggle. The pages on my desk were quite curious, and something I may have thought of myself. A group of soldiers who believe the government enhanced them in a secret program band together to learn the truth and help others in need along the way. What the hell? I took it and pitched it to Croker along with 3 of my ideas. I thought it was a good pitch meeting. My agent called 10 minutes after I left Croker's office on Wilshire in Santa Monica as I was about to get on the freeway and return to Allison, who was waiting for me, our camping gear packed. Well, you certainly made an impression, Brad, said agent. Croker wants to buy the super soldier idea right off for $500,000. Can you believe that? Hey, what is this storyline anyway? You never drove it past me. Never mind. He wants to go for it and get it on the fast track for his fall season lineup. This could be big, buddy. You were on your A game and it paid off. Now go out there and celebrate. Yeah, I could get along with this life change and everything else in the deal. I felt damn patriotic. Allison and I finished packing and headed to Big Bear with her sister and fiancé, who also happened to be in the Army and bore a strong resemblance to the fellow in the black jeans who had injected me with the wonder drugs. But he wasn't bald, and that toupee was impressive. I took it in stride. They had to keep an eye on the merchandise. It was going to be a nice week, I knew it, and maybe a nice life. Sure, I could marry the soldier girl, and if I ever got tired of her and decided to kill her again, she simply would come back to me, bright, shiny new. I would have more Allisons than I'd ever know what to do with. The end. Okay, that was a little story by moi, called Sleeping with a Weapon, or More Allisons Than I Know What to Do With. Okay, some of you are complaining about what I'm reading. What is there to complain about? Stop complaining. Jesus Christ. Or to turn the radio off if you don't want to listen, all right? All you people do is complain and bitch and moan. What, about super soldiers? Is that what you're bitching about? Whatever. Turn the radio off. Don't listen if you don't like it. If super soldiers offends you. Can't believe you people. It's Sunday. It's Worfpoe Story Hour. It's a day when we don't complain and bitch and moan, alright? This is freedom of speech. This is freedom. And it doesn't matter. Alright, so the next story is called Chewing Gum. It's a crime story. And if chewing gum offends you, if you don't like chewing on gum, well, la-di-da. You know, Harlan Ellison used to, when they would, people would complain about his stories and get all huffy and puffy in the magazines, he said, well, why are you reading the story? You're reading it, and then you're complaining about it. Chewing Gum by Michael Hemmingson. And this was recently sold to Alfred Hitchcock's Mystery Magazine. Cold Case Detective Stephen Miles looked straight at me when he said from the witness stand, "The murder of Renee Wagner is 30 years old. It was one of my first cases when I was detective in Portland Homicide, and yes, it's haunted me ever since." I did not meet his accusing eyes. "Which is why you kept on it after retiring and joining the Cold Case Crime Division?" asked the prosecuting attorney, a woman no older than 30 and not too long out of law school. "Yes," he said. "How many suspects were there for the murder of Renee Wagner?" "One, only one." "And is that suspect the man on trial today in this court?" "Yes, he is." "Can you identify that person in question?" Miles was still glaring. He pointed at me. "Lance Cartwright, the defendant." Let the jury notice that Detective Miles has indeed indicated that the defendant on trial, Lance Raymond Cartwright, Jr., is in the room. The judge nodded from the bench. He was an old judge, as judges tend to be, and looked like he would rather be somewhere else. My public defender twitched in his seat. I expected him to stand and object, but what was there to object to? He was in his early 40s and wore a cheap suit. PDs don't get paid well, and like the judge, he probably would have been happier somewhere else. I was in that camp. I didn't want to be here on trial for a murder 3 decades old. I wanted to be back on the streets, sleeping in parks and shelters and scrounging for food. That was a freedom I knew. I looked at Miles and nodded. We had our history. He was almost like an old friend. "Can you tell us how Renee Wagner was killed, Detective?" asked the young prosecuting attorney from the DA's office. ADA, Assistant District Attorney. I didn't know if I should take it as an affront that the DA was not handling the case himself, but I was hardly public enemy number one, not even worth more than 2 column inches buried inside the daily newspaper. "Blunt force trauma to the head," Miles replied, remembering well. "Her skull was caved in. Her killer kept smashing her skull in after she was dead. This was a crime of anger and hate." "And the suspect?" He paused. "Mr. Miles?" He snapped out of yesterday. "We suspected Cartwright from the start. He was dating Miss Wagner. Her friends told us that she had broken up with him a week prior to the murder and that she was worried because he didn't take the breakup very well and was harassing her." "Objection," said my public defender. "Hearsay. Miss Wagner never reported such to the police, and these are 30-year-old statements by people who aren't here to corroborate them." "Sustained," said the judge. "How old was Renee Wagner?" asked the ADA. 20, a college student. "And the suspect?" Mr. Cartwright was 23 at the time and worked at a bookstore. He was a writer, or so he claimed, and edited a local poetry magazine." He almost called me by my first name. Interesting. Miles went on. "Renee Wagner was a writer too. She had sent Cartwright some of her poems and he published them. This is how they met, and they started to date." "How long did the relationship last?" "Oh, we were told 7 months. 9, I wanted to say." "You questioned Mr. Cartwright?" Yes, he said he was at home reading when the murder happened. He had no one who could back his alibi. He was very nervous and sweating when we interviewed him, and my gut instinct told me right off that he killed her. Objection, said my PD. A gut instinct is not fact. But it is what homicide officers rely on the most, said the ADA. Overruled, said the judge. But you didn't arrest Mr. Cartwright. No, said Miles, we didn't have enough to go on. You didn't have the murder weapon. We determined it was a metal paperweight owned by Miss Wagner, which was missing from her apartment. We never recovered it. How many times did you bring Mr. Cartwright in for questioning? Half a dozen at least. 7, I wanted to say. And he kept to his story? He continued to deny anything, deny he took the breakup badly, but I knew he was the culprit. Objection, sustained. And if it's a cold case, and it's been a cold case ever since, said the ADA. Yes, and always on my desk, never letting me forget. He's like an elephant, I thought. Until you were able to obtain his DNA, said the ADA. We didn't have the means back then. Today is a different story. No further questions. The prosecutor took her seat. My PD cleared his throat, picked up his yellow notepad, and approached the witness stand. Detective Miles, after questioning my client, Mr. Cartwright, half a dozen times, you say, which was really 7 times if I may jog your memory, did you not harass my client for years? Objection, said the ADA. Let's not make accusations, counselor, said the judge. Let me put it another way, detective. Did you or did you not have my client under surveillance? We had him followed, yes. We, meaning you, yourself. Miles twitched in his chair. Yes. Was the surveillance authorized by your lieutenant? Yes. For how long? 3 weeks. But you followed my client for 2 years. Silence. Yes or no, Mr. Miles? Were you, when you were a homicide detective for the Portland PD, did you or did you not keep my client under surveillance following his movements for 2 years without the authorization of your department? Yes, Miles replied. It was off the books, on my free time. No law against it. Oh? Did you not unduly harass my client, confront him, and even threaten him to fess up to the murder or else? Miles looked at me and lied. No. I wanted so badly to get on the stand, to refute that falsehood, to tell the jury and those in the peanut gallery how a 28-year-old clean-cut Stephen Miles shadowed my every move, not only bothered me, but my friends, telling them that I was a cold-blooded killer and they should be careful. He contacted 2 women I dated and scared them off. If you don't stop, I'm going to file a harassment complaint, I said to him one night inside a bar. He had followed me into the place. He was drinking vodka straight up, had quite a few, and was drunk. He grabbed me by the collar and said, Go ahead, Cartwright. Go ahead and file your cowardly complaint. See if I care. Because in the end, I will see you doing 25 to life. You think you could walk away from it without facing the repercussions? But I'm not going to let that happen. The bouncer confronted us. Guys, take it outside, not in here. Police business, pal, said Miles. I don't care if it's the business of the baby Jesus, said the bouncer. Don't do it in here. Miles let go of me. You're lucky. We both know who the real criminal is here, I said boldly. We both know the truth. He took a swing. The bouncer caught the fist before it could hit me. They both got into a brawl. The bouncer was twice Miles' size and had Miles on the floor, arm pinned back. Miles was yelling about how he was a cop and the bouncer would be sorry. The truth is what I make it, Lance Cartwright, he screamed at me. I got out of there, relieved that Miles would not be on my tail now. I went to visit a friend to calm my nerves. The friend was a heroin dealer. I should have filed the complaint, but I knew it would raise more problems than solving anything. I didn't want his brother cops getting on the game and pressuring me to drop the complaint everywhere I went. And no one in the department would listen to what I knew either. They protected one another. I heard Miles was suspended 30 days over the scuffle. I knew he would have more time to follow me. Anything could happen when a cop has too much time on his hands. I decided to leave town. I wanted to tell this story now, but my PD advised me not to take the witness stand. I played the game because I had no pieces on the board left to maneuver. Redirect, said the ADA, standing up and walking toward the witness. Detective Miles, is it fair to say that you conducted yourself accordingly to the law and investigated Mr. Wagner's murder in all manner of professionalism? Yes, by the book. And Mr. Cartwright moved from Portland. He disappeared. No forwarding address, didn't tell anyone he knew where he went. We lost track of him. I kept checking public records, voter registration, library card applications, warrants, nothing. He didn't have a credit report beyond Portland. He simply dropped off the grid. But you kept searching for him as a cold case investigator. Yes, and you found him. We found him in San Diego, living in a homeless shelter. You took this case personally, didn't you? My PD asked Miles. Oh, I took it personally as any cop does when handed the case of a young woman slaughtered. I wanted to see justice served. I wanted her killer to pay for the crime. Do you deny you were obsessed with my client? Objection, said the ADA. Sustained. It was your second case after turning detective, said my PD. You failed to solve the first one, so you needed to solve this one to look good. I was only interested in finding the girl's killer. Did you know Renee Wagner? He squinted. What? My PD applied the dramatic pause. Before she was murdered, before she dated my client, didn't you personally know Miss Wagner? Objection, said the ADA. Overruled. Answer the question, Mr. Miles. Mr. Miles looked at me and said, No, I never knew her. If your client told you that, he is a liar and trying to muddy the facts. I never told my attorney a thing. Maybe he wasn't as bored as I figured. That night in my cell, I thought about the 30 years between Portland and San Diego. There were many other cities where I wandered, and a lot of heroin went into my veins. The drug landed me on the street. I kept writing poems or rented a post office box, published under a different name because I knew Miles was looking for any hint of my resurfacing. I got by from odd jobs and breaking into homes. I had an addiction to deal with, and addictions are painful and make you do desperate things. I also thought about Renee Wagner and her pretty smile. I could still see her in my memory. A 53-year-old man accused her of her murder. The next day, a female police officer in uniform took the stand. She was in her mid-20s, fair-skinned, her blonde hair pulled into a bun. Please state your name for the record, said the ADA. Allison Christine Miles. And you work for the Portland PD? Yes, I'm assigned to administration. On the desk, no real field work. She must have had fun playing her role on me. Are you related to Detective Stephen Miles? Asked the ADA. He's my uncle, the young officer confirmed. Did he recruit you for one of his cold cases? Yes, he did, the murder of Renee Wagner. Can you tell us how this came about? What did you do exactly to help with the case? Well, my uncle, Detective Miles, he had located an old suspect in an unsolved case. Lance Cartwright, the defendant, was living in a homeless shelter in San Diego, California. Mr. Cartwright had to be hospitalized for an infection and applied for government assistance to pay for medical bills. This information found its way to Detective Miles' attention. What we needed was a DNA sample from Cartwright to match the skin samples found under Wagner's fingernails. Seems she had clawed at his assailant before he attacked her. They didn't have DNA technology back then like we do now. Detective Miles tried to get a warrant to go down to San Diego and get the DNA sample, but the warrant was denied. He had an idea and asked if I would help. Those hours and days in the San Diego Public Library were the only joy I had, the only times of peace I could find. There I could read and let my mind wander. The truths did not fester inside me the way they did on the street or in the shelters, there among so many men who had failed. I had failed. I had not become the famous poet I had dreamed of, the dream I had shared with Renee. I was a man suspected of a heinous crime. When I did publish, it was under a nom de plume, and I only published in the obscure literary zines like the one I used to edit in Portland, folded and stapled photocopied sheets. Heroin was the best cure for this pain. If I could not afford or get my hands on H, there was always crystal meth or a fifth of whiskey. The little zine editors loved my verse about being down in the zero, being stoned and drunk, pissing myself while I passed out on a park bench, the morning pigeons crapping on me, and the kids going to school pointing and laughing at the pathetic degenerate who smelled like stale urine and cheap alcohol. I wondered what Renee thought of me, looking down from wherever she was. Nothing illegal was done, Miles said when he returned to the stand to back up his niece's story. I went down to San Diego and verified that Cartwright was in a homeless shelter. I posed as a homeless man myself. I spotted Cartwright immediately. He was 30 years old but still looked the same. I tracked his movements. Every day when he left the shelter, he would go to the library and read books and write in a little notepad. Poetry, I'm guessing. My best work yet, I wanted to say. It was a pretty solid routine, so I came up with a plan. I recruited my niece because she is, well, young and pretty. Cartwright once had fancied himself quite a ladies' man, and that sort of thing does not disappear in a man no matter how old he gets. I had my niece, Officer Miles, pose as a chewing gum survey worker. A table was set up outside the library, and she asked people to sample 3 different chewing gums and fill out a questionnaire on which gum they liked the best. They got a free pack of gum for it. I had the table set up by the library for 2 days before Mr. Cartwright stopped to do the survey, said Officer Miles. He was very flirtatious. He tried all 3, and I took the chewed gum from him in a napkin to toss in the trash. But it wasn't for the trash, asked the ADA. It was for DNA sampling, she replied. I never suspected a thing. Had no idea. Blah. Had no idea that pretty young lady giving out free gum was on my tail. She played her part well. Just like her uncle, she was good at hiding the truth from her face. The DNA expert was called to the stand, a regular egghead with the glasses and white t-shirt and a dozen pins in his shirt pocket. He talked about scientific data, the pros and cons of DNA matching, the variables and accuracies, the percentages, the methodology and science, and how my DNA from the gum matched the DNA under Wagner's fingernails. He showed charts blown up on a map board. He showed DNA markers on an overhead projector. My PD had no questions. Renee and I used to talk about our dreams of becoming famous poets. I wanted to be the Walt Whitman of the streets, a poet that drunks and housewives could relate to on different levels. She wanted to go the academic route, win some award for her first book of precise verse, get a tenured job, and live well on grants and endowed chairs. She was a delicate thing, and I was ragged on the edges. She told me more than her dreams. She told me about her childhood and the other men she had dated, and about the possessive ex-boyfriend she was afraid of. You want to do what? Said my lawyer. You heard me, I told him. We were in a conference room preparing for the 3rd day of the trial. I was hoping I heard wrong, he said. I'm changing my plea to guilty, I said. That's nuts! They have my DNA. I don't see how we can fight this. I plead guilty. Give me 15 years for manslaughter 1. The deal is still on the table, right? I don't do 25 to life. Like it mattered. My PD sighed and threw up his hands. It's your life. What was left of it. I had a visitor in prison, and I expected him. Stephen Miles. We sat across from each other at the stainless steel bolted table in the visiting area. He smiled. You're happy, I said. 30 years, I can close the books on this. You did the right thing, Lance. You fessed up, finally. I shrugged. Something you should have done 3 long decades ago. Another life, another truth, I said. Now look at us. We're both old men, and that's a truth neither of us can deny. The only truth is that justice wins, he said. You'll rot inside where you belong. 3 meals a day, medical, and a place to sleep, I said. Better than the street. All for something I never did. He hesitated before asking, why did you plead guilty? I have cancer, and you know that, Miles. I'll be lucky to live out the next 2 years. What choice do I have? Die on the street or die in here? Which is the lesser of 2 evils? It's done, he said, starting to stand up. I said, could have gotten on the stand, told the jury about that incident in the bar, or that I'd been with Renee the night before she died. You know, the kind of stuff she liked, and she scratched up my back, and that's how the skin got there. How come the DNA of my residual semen wasn't checked? Miles' faces reddened. I smiled this time. He sat down. Bastard. That's right, I said. We were getting back together. It was just too good, she said. The best from any guy she ever knew. Miles stood back up. You're where you belong now. I could have told the jury other things, I said. How Renee said this fellow she had dated a year before, this patrol officer she had met when she made a rolling stop at a stop sign at a red light, and he gave her a ticket, but said he would tear the ticket up if she would have dinner with him. A patrol cop who dreamed of being a badass detective was studying for the test. The cop that she dumped, but he wouldn't let go. This cop who threatened any guy she dated to stay away. This cop who she was afraid of might one day do something bad to her. Miles turned. Yeah? So why didn't you take the stand? Shrug. It's all hearsay. And who's going to believe some junky homeless poet? He tilted his head. Yeah. Who? Shrug. Certainly not your niece. She looks up to you, followed your footsteps. What would she say if she knew the truth? Truths are what you make of them, Lance, he said. We both know who killed Renee, I said. You, he said. Sure, why not? It doesn't matter now. We all pay in the end for one thing or another. Things even out. He walked out of the visiting room, stopping to give me one last glance. I expected a snide grin or a final demeaning comment. Instead, he looked kind of sad. What would he do with his life now, no longer hunting me down? What would he do with his time and what we both knew? I was no longer a threat, but would he sleep peacefully at night? I would, knowing he had his prison cell. I stood up, and the corrections officer escorted me back to mine. The end. Okay, that's a little story called Chewing Gum. I actually based it on a real case that I read about a month or so ago, or 2 months ago, actually. A while ago, and then I wrote the story that a cold case was solved uh, using a fake chewing gum testing table. They had a suspect. He was in a homeless shelter, but they couldn't get. It was a suspect of an old cold case, and they couldn't get a court ordered DNA warrant approved. So they went about and got his DNA in a sneaky way using the chewing gum. Perfectly legal. It was voluntary, and if he takes the gum out and leaves it as trash, it then becomes um, what they call leftover evidence, and they could test the DNA against old DNA back when they didn't have the technology to do that, and they solved the cold case that way. And I thought, wow, that'd make a great story. So I wrote this story and sold it, and that was that. Let's see what we got here. We got one more really quick story. I think I could read it in the time left. Science fiction story, sort of, called Tranquility. It's real short. So, Tranquility by Michael Hemmingson, Worfpoe, the guy you all love to complain about. 1. The end of the 5-year sentence is soon to come to a close, and you are anxious for the government to return what they removed from you, your other half of who you are, that criminal who has been denied the right to life and society, detained in some mainframe hell where all the 5 to 10s go. 2 more weeks. In 2 weeks you will be whole in real time, and you will know what heinous act of malfeasance you committed. Your wife Anna knows, but by law she cannot tell you. No one in your family, at work, friends or foes, are permitted to say what it was you did, otherwise the final phase of the punishment would be moot. The real-time moment when your missing half is downloaded back into the determined, and it is determined if your missing part has been rehabilitated into a functional member of this world. You've been going about your life the past 4 years, 11 months and 2 weeks, half a person, and it is not easy. Sometimes the curiosity and torment of not knowing can get to a person, make a person mad. Sometimes when reunification happens and the horrible crime is realized, a person wants to die and self-terminates. This is why some decide not to become whole again. You had that option, to not have your full self returned. Some choose that, never wanting to know. You had to. Anna disagreed. I think we'll be both better off if you didn't know, she said several times in those last days. Of course you wanted to ask her, why, what did you do? Why would it be so bad to remember? Things might not be nice anymore, she said. Home life was generally tranquil, and you liked that. So did Anna. Tranquility was the best avenue for all families, especially one like yours, man and wife, late 20s, and one small child, age 3. Tranquility, as the government liked to remind everyone on billboards and screens, keeps society productive. And love makes for a happy home, and happy homes make for a tranquil world. We have a happy home, Anna said. What would you want it any other way? 2. The second year of the incarceration, you went underground and paid considerable money to find a mine cracker to fish around your skull and find residual remnants of your missing self. The cracker was a teenager, but you were told he was the best. You met him in an abandoned building, an apartment where people once lived and loved, and he sat you down and connected various contact wires to your skull. When they erase part of you, they can never really erase it all, the cracker said. A shadow is always there, hiding in the murky gray matter, bits and pieces, and sometimes even the whole. They shove it all back in redundant packs of the medulla oblongata. Lovely, you said. Now, before we do this, I am not responsible for any ugliness you might find out. You know, whoever you were when you were holed. I'm paying you. I find nothing, no refund. You don't know what happened then. He gave you something to relax and go into REM sleep mode, but all you could remember was your body shaking violently and blood coming out of your nose. God damn it, all the shiznit, the cracker grumbled, pulling the contacts and nodes off. Weakly, what did you do? Nothing. It's what they did. They put a block on all the residual. Whatever you did, it must have been pretty bad, dude. Try again. No way. Try again, damn it. You'll die, and I'm not going for that half-head. I want a refund then. I said, you found something, not nothing, and you said it'd kill me. The cracker threw up his hands. I'll give you 25% back, just because I feel sorry for you, half-head. You take the risk, I don't. You didn't argue with him. You knew you had been a bad person. That was enough. 3. After the first year, it was easy to spot those in your shoes, the criminals who were walking around with the missing heads, the hollowness of their eyes, the confusion of what did I do wrong on their faces, even the way they walked, because they walked like you, slowly and carefully, and did something deep, and something deep told you that there was a time you strolled through society with a lighter step. You watched debates, read sociological reports, and the speeches of pundits who were against this sort of punishment. Does removing the criminal from the mind of the body also remove the spirit of the criminal from the body? A cruel and unusual punishment. They removed memories and personality are tortured in some cyber prison, a mainframe kept secret, and when reunified with the body, the results are unpredictable. We have 10,000s of people suffering and they don't know what they're suffering. How can we, in a country that promotes tranquility and love, call that fair and just? 4. The day before reunification, Anna cries and cries, weeping like a widow at a funeral. What's wrong, you ask? Tomorrow I'll be the man you knew, always knew. She just cries. 5. They come. The 2 government agents come in their gray smocks and their machines, hooking up the contacts and electrodes and putting the helmet and visor on you. They do this right in your home, sitting you down in front in the living room. They are quick and efficient and seem genuinely concerned for your well-being. It might hurt a bit, one says. I'm ready. We mean after, says the other. 6. And when it is done, when I am whole, when I am with you and you are with me and there are no more secrets, then comes the pain. The pain of 5 years inside the mainframe. The pain of 5 years of digital anguish. The pain of 5 years without a body and reliving certain memories over and over. Memories of my alleged crime. No, I say, pulling the helmet and wires off my head. For that, just for that, I was made to suffer? Law's the law, pal, one of the agents says. 5 years, I say, because of that? I say this to Anna, my wife, my darling, loving wife. She is standing behind me. I turn to her. She's crying again. Anna, I say, you condemned me for that because I didn't want to stay. I didn't want a child. I didn't want to be a married man and tied down to this life, I say to her. I rise. She backs away. One of the agents grabs my arm. Easy, buddy. You filed a criminal complaint because I didn't love you, I say to her, resigned now to the pain, the exile, the truth. You were going to leave me, alone and childless, she whimpered, her back against the wall. It was a choice I made, I say with great emptiness. A choice. Free will doesn't make a tranquil society, one agent says. You know that. Happy home, happy family, says the other. It works. We lived in peace and bliss, says my wife, for 5 years. There was never any love because I didn't love you, I tell her. Maybe I acted that way when I wasn't whole because I knew no other way, but that means it was all a lie. Don't you see? I was half a person. They said you'd be better, Anna cries. You were supposed to have learned. Ma'am, one of the agents says to Anna, you can file an extension on your complaint. Looks like 5 years in hell wasn't long enough for him to get it. It's okay, I say to them, hands up. No, all is fine. I've learned. Do you want to be downloaded back, buddy? Says the agent, gesturing to the case with the memory cell. No, I say softly. No. You going to be happy? Nod, smile. Happy as a clam in the ocean. Then go hug your wife. I move to Anna. I hold out my arms. I smile. Tell her all is fine, one of the agents says. Anna, I say, I didn't know what I was saying. The shock of reunification does that sometimes, says an agent. I'm okay now, I say. Anna, I know what I did was wrong. I've paid my debt. I'm ready to go on. I think I sound convincing. Where's our child, Anna? I want to hug and kiss her. My wife smiles. She comes to me, into my arms, and the agents clap their hands and congratulate me. 7. I sit with Anna and my child for a family portrait. The three of us smile. We are happy and tranquil. I can play the role for a while, until I figure out how to break out of this prison. The end. Oh yeah, it's a little short story called Tranquility. A little story about conformity, government oppression, the oppression of free will and choice. So with that little